Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving and Thriving in Residency podcast. I'm Charley Lowry, your host and director of GME Relations at PracticeLink. This show is all about exploring the world of graduate and undergraduate medical education. We'll dive into the real-life experiences, successes, and challenges faced by medical students, residents, and fellows, while also highlighting valuable tools to support you, whether that's financial planning, student aid, or the many free resources provided by PracticeLink. If you're thinking about med school, currently studying, or deep into residency or fellowship, this podcast is here to offer insights and support to make your journey a bit easier than those before you.
Hello, and welcome to Surviving and Thriving in Residency. Today's guest is Jill Wenger, a second-year student at University of Tampa, pursuing her Master's of Physician Associate degree. Jill earned her bachelor's from University of Missouri in Kansas City. Hello, Jill, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? I think you're a second year going into your third year?
That's right, yeah. Technically, there are only 2 years of PA school, even though my program is 27 months, so we have like a third year, but I'll still be a second year until I graduate.
Oh, gotcha. And we'll talk a little bit about how the program is laid out and things like that. So to begin with, tell me about your decision to become a physician associate. What all influenced that decision, and when did you decide to pursue this journey? How old were you, and things like that?
So my journey to PA school, it's not the same as a lot of students that you see today. I had first decided at 18 years old, I was super passionate about massage therapy. That was like my dream and my goal in life, and so I decided to pursue that. My mom's a nurse and my dad's an EMT and my stepmom's a nurse. So I have a lot of like medical professionals in my family. And I really liked the whole body view of just being a massage therapist. And I had owned my own business for like 10 years. And at that point, I had 3 patients come to me who had multiple sclerosis. And it was really weird because I'd seen all different kinds of patients, but I'd never had anybody with this diagnosis before. And one of the patients told me that her MS symptoms started with like unilateral numbness. And I was like, oh, that's kind of strange. And I just sort of filed that back. And then I had another patient within a couple weeks who came in and he had the same thing. He had unilateral weakness. And I was like, have you seen a doctor? And he was like, no, I don't believe in medicine. That's why I'm here. And I was like, okay. So I saw him and I massaged him for a few months. And finally I said, hey, you're not getting better. And I'm worried now. And I think you should see a doctor. And I won't see you again until you tell me that you're cleared medically, because I'm worried that I could be hurting you actually. And so he kind of grumbled, but he did see a doctor, and it ended up, he had transverse myelitis. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? And it ended up being sarcoidosis of the spine, which that is a place that you can get sarcoidosis. But I had obviously never heard of that before as a massage therapist. And that whole process was so exhilarating for me, even though like it wasn't great for him, obviously, because now you have this lifelong incurable disease. But he showed me his scans and we talked it through. And I thought, I love being a massage therapist, but I have to expand my scope of practice now. So I was 28 years old. And so like my biggest thing is don't ever give up. If you are 30 years old and you think I can't possibly do another job, you're wrong, because you can. But I was 28 years old and I had a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. And I started back at my bachelor's degree. I finished that and then I applied to PA school. And so kind of, a little convoluted, but that's how we're here.
That's a great way to start. Do you keep in touch with that patient by chance?
I actually do. I was just messaging with him the other day. It was his birthday, and I was just seeing kind of how his treatments were going and seeing if he'd tried some things. Of course, this is geared towards medical students and medical professionals. So you guys know, like the number one thing you do is steroids, which he does not enjoy doing. So I was just seeing if he'd found anything that worked for him. I think, he was trying some PRP and he didn't think it helped that much, and some stem cells, but he's a really interesting person to talk to just because he's so open with his medical information, which I was his massage therapist, not his doctor, but it is nice to, kind of have that.
Yeah, I have a million questions to ask you, and I shouldn't even go down this road, but in your PA training, has MS been a target area for you to learn more about specifically?
Well, we have just one section that is more of like a neuro section, and we did talk about MS some there. I haven't yet had the opportunity, like in my clinicals, to see. I don't even think I've seen any patients with MS. I don't think I've seen any. I still have an elective left, and one of the things that I wanted to do was neurology and neurosurgery. So it's just difficult to get those spots. And so it's just one of the things that I'm definitely considering because it sort of gripped my whole attention and changed the trajectory of my life, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think MS is such a hard one because there's so many symptoms, so many different occurrences. So that's a hard one. So tell me about University of Missouri. You went there for your undergrad. How were your undergrad years? Anything there that you want to talk about? How difficult was that and the whole process of going to school?
So I actually went to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, which if you're from Missouri, you already know this, but there's MU, that's like the University of Missouri, and then they have a couple of different branches. One that I went to was in Kansas City. I started back in 2019, January of 2019. And so COVID hit like right after I had just completed like my prerequisites essentially. And then because I was working and our goal, my husband and I's goal during that time was to stockpile as much money as we could because we knew that PA school was going to be expensive and I wasn't going to be working. And so I took usually 18 hours a semester. And then I worked on the other days. And it was great because I owned my own business. So I was able to manipulate my hours. If I needed classes on Tuesday, Thursdays, I could do that. So the flexibility of my job made it so great. It was really tough. I had a 6-month-old and he decided he wasn't going to sleep it through the night until he was like 3, until I finished my undergrad essentially. And so I would be up with my anatomy textbook at night with him just reading, and I would read him anatomy textbook. I would read him all of my notes. I took Spanish. I really want to learn Spanish. And so I took a Spanish every semester. And so I would just practice my flashcards out loud to him. And that was, kind of that. So it was difficult, but part of that was me just wanting to get it done as quick as possible, and taking 18 hours a semester was quite a lot.
So you have a 3-year-old walking around speaking in medical terms, right?
Exactly. We taught them all of like the medical terms. We'd be like, instead of being like, what's this? It's my head. He'd be like, it's my cranium, or here's my clavicle. Or, it was kind of a silly party trick, I guess.
Oh, I love it. That's incredible, though. That's great. That's a good way to do it. So how about applying for PA school? Tell me about that process. How many schools did you apply to? Was it expensive? How was the interview process? Things like that, the whole gamut of applying and deciding which one.
The PA school application is called the CASPA. And it's kind of nice because it allows you to instead of having to put together a package for each individual school, you put together the package and you can send it out to as many schools as you want to pay for. I believe that when I did it, and I haven't checked on prices since, I believe that it was about $179 for every school. And then the application itself costs money too. So one of the things that I did, we had kids and I had a job, but obviously we wanted to be conscious about our budget, was I made a list of places that I would conceivably live. And a lot of those had to do with where was our family? Did we have connections? Did we know people those places? And could we afford living there? So my husband's brother and sister-in-law, they live in Portland, Oregon, which would have been amazing to live there, but we could not have afforded it. So, like that, it was just kind of looking at those kinds of things. We ended up looking at, we could apply to schools in Kansas City and we could apply to schools in Tampa. And the reason there was my parents had moved to Sarasota, which is about an hour south of Tampa. They had moved here about 15 years ago. And so it helped. We knew that we had someone who could help with the kids. And also, I mentioned earlier, my mom's a nurse, so she understands medical training to some extent. And she knew that it would be this group process for me. And so I ended up applying to 10 schools in the Kansas City and the Tampa area. I applied to a couple south. more like Fort Myers area, and then applied to Tampa and then applied here. I ended up getting accepted for interviews at 4 of those. And the first interview I had was the University of Tampa, and I was accepted into them. And so I also accepted the interview at Kansas City because the rest of our families live in Kansas City. And so I accepted that interview too, and I was not accepted to their school. Their program is a lot smaller. And then I canceled the other interviews because of the Tampa schools, University of Tampa was my number one.
Tell me, as far as moving, how was that process? That's a huge move.
Yeah, it was a huge move. And we not only, of course, I was moving myself, but I was moving my husband's job and I was moving my kids. So it was all a lot. The first thing that we did before we moved, actually, I had reached out. We had like a class group, like a big messaging system where all 50 of us were on. And I'd reached out and I'd been like, hey, what are some areas that you would live, some areas that you wouldn't live? And we were just getting like different answers from everyone. And so we decided that the first thing we were going to do was rent. And personally, I think this was the best decision of our life because we would have absolutely bought a house in the first neighborhood that we rented in. And I ended up not liking it. So I think for us, it worked out perfectly. So we came in, we got a house here, and then my husband ended up getting a job and everything just fell in line to move. We did like the pods thing, and that was perfect because we didn't have to drive a huge truck all the way across the country. But finding schools and doing that kind of thing, those were all so difficult. And so it was a process, but it just took a lot of time, a lot of sitting down and saying, okay, this is what we want, and here's where we can get that.
You know, I travel a lot for work, and I visit residency programs, and I visit students, medical students, and this always comes up. We always talk about planning for moving because it's besides being timely and just very overwhelming, it's also very expensive getting everything set up for the first time. But it's good to hear you say you're glad you decided to rent because that's part of what I talk to them about. Some groups that go with me to talk to medical students, it's the common advice, don't buy right off. Don't buy a home right off. Rent your first year at least. Make sure it's the right fit. So that's good advice, I think, for listeners.
Yeah, I think it worked out really well for our family. The school that we thought was going to be amazing ended up being just okay. I mean, like my kids' school. My school is, I love my school, but the kids' school, it was just okay. And then the neighborhood, which looked really nice, wasn't that great. And we ended up moving not that far away, but we're just in a much better for us area. Not the other area was fine. It just had a lot more older couples and my kids didn't have anybody to play with. And now they've got friends. The school is amazing and we just wouldn't have known. So I think renting is absolutely the way to go.
Sidetrack here, but when you decided to move, were you all jazzed and were you all saying, oh, we'll go to the beach every weekend? And have you been to the beach hardly at all?
Well, of course, that was, Midwest girl to Florida transplant. I could not wait to be next to the beach. So we live in Apollo Beach, which is actually a little bit disingenuous because the beach here is not one you swim in because it's the bay. But we live not that far from some of the United States, at least most beautiful beaches. We're about 45 minutes away from Anna Maria Island, which has that sugar white sand. So gorgeous. And then we live about 40 minutes away from St. Pete Beach and Paso Grill. And so it's really been amazing. I am the most beach lover of my family. My kids don't love being sandy. So they are the rate limiting factor for our beach visits. There's a beach near us that has a bunch of shark teeth. We just went there last weekend. So, it's not bad. One of the things, I feel like I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the things that we kind of did, we were sort of all burning out at the end of clinical year. And we had just studied for like 1,000 hours a day for an entire year. And my friends and I all decided we still needed to study, but we needed to do something for ourselves. And so we had Fridays off from class. And one of the things that we did, we pretended like this was our job. So we were at school from 8 to 5, no matter what. We were there studying. If we got out at 3, we didn't go home and laze around or whatever you wanted to do when you were off. We stayed at school until 5. Like I said, we were kind of burnt out from that. And so one of the things that we decided to do was actually go to the beach. So on Fridays, we would go to the beach. We'd do a 2-mile walk. And we would do our flashcards and we'd do all of our stuff. And we did that every single week. And I feel like you could see the change in our friend group to the point where like more started joining us and they were like, what are you doing? Because you guys look so happy and this is so grueling right now.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle is overall well-being, body, mind, spirit. So that's a good way to incorporate it.
When I started school, everyone was like, make sure you're scheduling time for you. You have to schedule time for you. And I was like, I've got that. I was a massage therapist. I know all about self-care. And then when school started and you're like having to study all of these things all at one time and you're learning so much information and you're learning it at such a depth that you have never learned any information before, all of a sudden it becomes really easy to be like, well, I need to see my husband, I need to see my kids, myself is on the back burner now. And I think what that taught us was we can't put ourselves on the back burner because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't help anyone else.
That's very true. I think a lot of times it happens without realization that it's happening because you also have family outside of your spouse and your children. Life happens to everybody. Emergencies arise. Things happen. And a lot of people internalize stress and they don't even realize they're doing it. So we're all about the whole body well-being for sure.
Yeah, I remember at one point, my dad, who lives in Kansas City, he called me and he said, "Are you mad at me? I haven't talked to you." And I'm one of those people where I try to call people on my way home. But from PA school, I was like so overwhelmed with information. I felt like I couldn't even make phone calls because my brain just needed to rest. I had to like really make an effort to say like, no, I have to call my dad. I have to call my mom. It's not just the 4 people that live under my roof that I have to take care of. I have relationships with all these people and everyone's been so great and understanding too. But I just remember that first month of school afterwards, he called me. He's like, "I haven't talked to you for a month." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm not mad."
That's so grounding, right? That brings you back to kind of your center is when you can talk to your parents and know that they're behind you and supporting you. So important.
At PracticeLink, we believe your physician job search should be simple, supportive, and stress-free. That's why creating an account has always been and will always be completely free for physicians. Create your free account today at PracticeLink.com to start receiving your latest and most exclusive job opportunities directly to your inbox.
Well, tell me about your first year of PA school. What was your schedule like? What else did you do for well-being? You know, a lot of students tell me they find a gym, they find a church, they try to watch what they eat, you know, things like that, because it's so easy to fall into traps when you're so busy. But tell me about your first year, what a typical day looked like and how you felt during the first year.
So our year started in August. And we kind of hit the ground running. So one of the things that was really important to me, there's a couple of different ways that PA school curriculums can be laid out. And it was really important for me to find, I'm not sure what they call it. They might have a name for it, but I'm just not aware of what that is. But for instance, we learned musculoskeletal and rheum. We learned the farm for that. We learned the pathophys for that. We learned all of that at one time. And then in cardio, we learned all of that. So it wasn't like we just had this one pharmacokinetics class. We had a class every week that was farm that went along with what we were talking about because I knew just the way that I learn, I would do much better understanding. I mean, there's blood pressure medicines, there's thousands. And so just learning how you can learn that in that. So that was really important for me. So my first semester started with anatomy and physiology. And then we had the medical diagnostics class that was like learned x-rays and imaging. And then a labs class where we learned like some basic labs. And then we had a physical diagnosis class where you just learned about what does an actual physical look like. After that, we started moving into that medical model that I was explaining. So my second, third, and fourth semesters, we learned body system by body system. So we would obviously do the entire unit, take the test at the end, and then they've started implementing at the end of our year, those were called like clinical medicine classes, and now there's like a clinical medicine final. Because I think what a lot of people in our class was doing, they were trying to learn the information to get an A on the test, but not to retain it. And so our program was like, well, if you're just pumping and dumping, essentially, we're going to make it that you have to kind of retain this. And so anytime there's a change in how something runs, it's always really stressful. And I agreed with that. But now we're doing end of rotation exams and stuff.
So talk about burnout a little bit. You said at one point, I know it's got to be hard. How do you cope with burnout?
I feel like anytime you talk to a medical student, they'll tell you this, like any kind of medicine, they say you're drinking from a fire hose. And it's such a truth. And I know you would ask like what my day looked like. My kids were able to be dropped off at 6 a.m. I would drop them off at 6. I moved about 30 minutes south of Tampa, so I'd get to school about 6:30. I'd study from 6:30 to 8 with my group. And then we would get out of school, we'd have an hour lunch, and then we get out of class around 2 or 3. I'd study from that time until 5, and then I'd go pick up my kids. My husband's job ended up out of kind of nowhere. Their job picked up, and he had to travel a lot. So my entire didactic year, he was gone like 8 months or something. I mean, it was a lot. Then I would come home, get the kids dinner and fed, get them in bed, and then study from like 8 to 11. And so as you can imagine, studying all that time, it led to pretty significant study burnout. And I feel like it probably happens this way for every single person who gets burnout. You don't feel it coming on. All of a sudden, you're like, holy smokes, I can't read another thing. I cannot do this anymore. I don't know that it's that way for everyone. I guess maybe I'm just making an assumption, but that's how it was for me. All of a sudden I was like, what am I doing? Can I even finish school at this point? Like, do I even have what it takes? It's so silly. Never ever let yourself talk to yourself that way. To any of the listeners, don't do it, because you can and you will, and it's perfect. And so we did the Friday studying that I told you about. And I actually started taking one weekend day off a week. That day was my, I'm not even going to think about studying day. The group that I studied with, that happened to be Sundays for us. And so they were such a huge part of my PA school, was finding this group of people who, number one, they studied the same way as me. Number two, most of them were parents, so they understood the obligations. The average age in my class, I think, is like 30 something. And that's not the case for most PA school classes. But there are people who I really love in my class that we're just not all that close because they hang out when I can't hang out. Like, they're all getting dinner on Saturday nights and my kids are in bed, so I can't be there. But that was really important for me, was finding the group of people who understood me, who studied like me and learned like me, and then allowed me to have this sense of community that, even more than just like, oh, it's PA school, this sense of community with people that, become like your family.
That's so nice. I think post-COVID, I think it's been really a different world. A lot of schools and a lot of programs, I don't know about the PA programs, but I know a lot of medical schools have gone to virtual classes, and a lot of those have not resumed back into the classroom. They haven't gone back to. And I think the hard part of that is, prior to that, when they were in class, you had study groups, you had the support. And when you're doing that on your own virtually, it's a different world altogether. So I think anytime you have a team that you can rely on, help each other out, pull each other through, you're going to succeed.
Yeah, we made a pact with my friends. So some of our classes, they were still the virtual, which I don't thrive well in that situation personally. I know some of our class really, really likes to learn that way. That is not how I like to learn. And so we actually made a pact that when we had a virtual class, we would still go to school and we would actually connect it to like the screen, and we would watch our lectures as if we'd still take our break at an hour and at 2 hours. And that helped me. And I think the group slowly grew to be like multiple people in our class. And I understand not wanting to come to school for that. I'm just someone who gets very easily distracted at my house. I can find 100 other things to do that did not involve sitting and watching this video. And so it was really helpful for me. And I think for most of our friend group to like actually come in, we could take notes, we could do all of the things, that have a discussion, pause the video if we needed to. And that helped us personally.
And I think if you're paying for it, right, you're paying this big cost for this education, make the most of it. And It sounds like you definitely are making the most of it. So you're what? You're 6 months from finishing.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So what's the next 6 months curriculum look like for you?
So for PA schools, I think that all of them are this way now, at least if they're accredited. I believe it kind of has to be this way. So you have the first part that's the didactic, and then the second part is clinical. So I'm currently in my clinical phase of school, which is amazing. For our school, we have 9 clinical rotations that are each about 5 weeks. So you have the 7 cores, which are behavioral health, women's health, pediatrics, emergency medicine, surgery, internal medicine, or like inpatient medicine, and then the behavioral health. So from those 7, then you get 2 electives at our school. And at the end of your 5 weeks, so it's called an end of rotation exam, and it's a standardized test. It is 120 questions. So it's kind of preparing you for the PANCE and those like big level testing fatigue questions. You get 1 minute per every question, and it just covers this huge blueprint of topics. So, of course, your hope is that while you're in emergency medicine, you're going to understand how to manage pancreatitis, or you're going to get some DKA situations, and you're going to be able to then apply it when you see these questions come up, and you're like, oh, their blood sugar is really high, and they're not feeling very good. Let's see what's going on here. And so it's been really great, but you still have to study for those. So I still am studying. Clinical year has felt sort of like a breath of fresh air because you get to see patients, you get to talk to patients. And in some ways it's pretty stressful too, because you're talking to people who know more than you all the time. And so you're like talking to a doctor. I remember, just a funny aside, on my emergency medicine rotation, we were talking about, should we or should we not x-ray this ankle? And I was like, oh, I'm going to pull out my little knowledge and I'm going to say, oh, are we using the Ottawa ankle rules? And my preceptor at the time, emergency medicine, if you are a student listening to this and you have no emergency medicine experience, it's kind of crass, I don't know, is maybe a way to put it. I loved it. I'm not saying anything bad. It was amazing. But the doctor looks at me and he goes, Ottawa, are we in Canada? And I was like, no, he goes, we're just going to x-ray it. He goes, she's 14 years old. The fact that if we send her out of here with a fracture and we didn't x-ray it, then that's worse than just the small amount of radiation. And I was like, man, I was really ready to throw my textbook knowledge out. And he goes, it's a great textbook. You should remember it for the test. After that, just x-ray the ankle. So I've done behavioral medicine, inpatient medicine, the surgery and emergency medicine, and I'm currently on my first elective. And I feel like it's really difficult to say what my favorite is because I've loved an aspect of every single one of them. Behavioral medicine, I was really thankful to get insight into this population that is pretty protected. And so that was really great. And I loved being in a hospital. My preceptor for inpatient medicine was amazing. She was so good. She taught me so much. Emergency medicine, I think I just sort of alluded. It was fun. It was wild. It was always something different. My surgical rotation, I actually did orthosurge. So ortho is one place that I am super interested in. As being a massage therapist and understanding how the body and bones and muscles work was a huge part of that job. So I've loved that. And now I'm actually doing an ortho urgent care, which has been so fun. So it's hard to say. I don't know. I think they're all my favorite.
Well, if you stay in Florida, I'm sure there is no shortage of orthosurgery practices. So yes, that's a bonus right there for sure. So you have a few still left to go. So maybe women's health might be your favorite, right? You haven't had that one yet. I think that one question a lot of people ask me is, do a lot of the medical students, do they know what they're going to go into when they start school? And it's always changing when they start those clinical rotations in third year. I've had students, I remember a couple, but one who came to me and said, Charlie, could you please have my emergency medicine rotation at the end of the year? I don't want to do emergency medicine. It's just not me. I'm not a fan of seeing blood or any trauma. Ended up being an ER doctor. So you never know what's going to happen when you go on those clinical rotations, but always fun. That's the fun part. So now at this point, what kind of hints or tips would you have for a brand new student? If you were walking in the door today, either to undergraduate planning to go into PA school, or if you were walking in today, your first year in Tampa, what would you tell yourself? What would you say don't worry about? Or what would you say you need to focus more on this? Or how could your life be better or easier?
I think as far as undergrad goes, I went to like a smaller state school and I was not hindered in that. And so sometimes I think people get a little caught up on like, I want to go to this school because it's amazing. And while that's probably true, I haven't felt like going to that school was any worse for me. I don't think you have to do it this way, but personally, it has helped a lot that we saved money while I was doing that. And I worked full time still while going to my undergrad. I know that feels not doable for a lot of students. And so I'm not saying like that is going to make or break you, but it helped us to have a nest egg that now we can kind of fall back on and cushion. And I don't feel so like, oh, I have to take more money out and I have all these loans. If I was going to talk to myself in August of 2023, Jill, and anyone else in my class and anybody anywhere, I think I would say getting A's feels very important until you are in a real world situation, because it does not matter that I got an A on my cardio exam when someone walked in with a heart attack. I was so hard on myself. I got a C on one of my tests and I was so hard on myself about this C. I cried. I mean, like, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's fine. Everything worked out. And the C on that ended up changing my whole grade in the class. And so, like I didn't get the grade I was set to get. And it doesn't matter. Like now it does not even matter. And so I think I would say it's okay if you don't do well. However, make sure that, number one, studying for PA school is unlike any other studying you've ever done. And you won't know how to do it till you get there because you have no way to prepare. There's no way to understand how much information you're getting in such a short time. But number two, I would say just be a little bit easier on yourself, because you are going to have to change your entire dichotomy of your life. And it's okay that you don't get straight A's. Like, even if you are used to getting a straight A, it's fine now. And so just be kind to yourself. If you wouldn't say this to your best friend, don't say it to yourself.
It's good advice. Let's talk a little bit about the First Practice Fund. So for our listeners who don't know, Jill is the recipient of the PracticeLink First Practice Fund, which is our scholarship for an APP, and it's a $2,500 award. And it's based on 4 questions that she answered, somewhat essay style. And out of a lot of applicants, we chose yours for many reasons. Your CV was really great, but your answers were very sincere, very heartfelt. And so I just wanted to talk to you about that. First of all, it has to feel good. Congratulations to you for winning.
Thank you so much.
Yes, of course, of course.
Physicians, are you looking for the right practice in the perfect community? We can help. Schedule a quick free call with a PracticeLink physician relations specialist today. We'll connect you with recruiters and help guide you toward the job and place of your dreams. Visit PracticeLink.com for more information.
So let's talk about that a little bit. In your essay, something that stood out to me was sharing your career goals and how the First Practice Fund will help you achieve them. And I wondered if maybe you would share your answer for that.
Yes, I will, of course. I'm going to, I think, just read it, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the prompt says, share your career goals and how the First Practice Fund will help you achieve them. And I put, I would love to work in a rural emergency room as a physician associate. There are so many underserved people in our nation that have had a difficult time getting good health care. When I was in high school, the closest hospital was over an hour away, and the closest trauma center was even farther. I knew people who just stitched themselves up at home because they didn't have access to great care. Maybe it was Saturday and the clinic didn't open again until Monday morning. I want to be someone in those small communities that they can trust and they can see when their son's leg is broken under like the Friday night lights, or when their dad, who's a farmer, cuts his hand and he can't get it to stop bleeding. When their young teenage friend is in a car accident and needs to be evaluated. I want to be the face that people can trust, and I want them to get cared for in a way that doesn't give prejudice to their circumstances. Getting the scholarship will help me achieve these goals because it will help me pay for classes, books, and applications that help me in the emergency medicine field. It allows me to study more and have more free time to do research and research new techniques. And it will also allow me to pay to join different groups like the SENPA, which is the Society of Emergency Medicine PAs, the AAPA, the American Association of Physician Associates, and FAPA, which is the Florida Association of Physician Associates, which are essential for networking. And then I just said, I appreciate your consideration for the scholarship. If you choose me, it will help me and my family be able to afford the last 2 semesters of PA school and will allow me to join networking associations, eventually allowing me to follow my dreams and helping those in rural communities.
What's next for you? What do you see down the road for you?
So immediately next, I go to my pediatric rotation. I'm pretty excited. It is in a community health center. And so it's for people in the Tampa area that are underinsured or uninsured. They see everybody. It's called Tampa Family Health Centers. They do a whole list of things. It's not just peds or family. They do everything there. So that's really cool. I'm really excited. My preceptor is actually a grad of the University of Tampa. And so he actually was at my interview. She was one of the reasons that I wanted to go to the University of Tampa so much because she spoke so highly of her classes and the school. So I'm very excited for that. And then we graduate in December. So yeah, like you said, it was 6 months. I haven't even allowed myself to look at a calendar, honestly, because it's close, but it seems so very far away, but not in a bad way. It's good. And then after that, of course, we have to take the PA National Certification Exam and then applying for jobs. So I'm pretty excited. There are a couple emergency medicine fellowships. So not every specialty as a PA has a fellowship, but there are a couple that have some fellowships. One of them being emergency medicine. Of course, it's so acute and you can't afford to miss things. Not that you really can in any medicine, but in some ways I feel very prepared as a PA, and in some ways I feel like I'm not prepared at all. So that's something I'm kind of considering. If you do research on it, like half of the people are like, it's absolutely necessary. And then half of the people are like, you'll learn on the job. So I'm still kind of doing some research and looking there, but overall, I'm pretty excited for that.
And I'm sure there's a fellowship probably in Tampa, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I know there's a pediatric emergency medicine in Tampa. Well, it's actually in Clearwater at Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
The other one that I know that's pretty popular is at the Florida State University, FSU. And then I think University of Florida has one too. They're kind of all over, but I don't know that Tampa has one specifically.
Gotcha. So now, have people told you before your peds rotation to buff up on the vitamin C and zinc and all of that, that you're likely going to come home sick from that rotation?
Yeah, my friend is at her peds rotation right now, and she's had like strep throat and everything else. So yes, but I think I am a little bit of an advantage there because I do have 2 children who bring me all of their disgusting things from school and elsewhere.
You have immunity built up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the kids come in handy for that for sure. It'll be a fun rotation, I'm sure. So a little bit about us and about PracticeLink. You know, we've been around for a long time. We're past our 30th year. I think we're in year 31 or 32, and we are a free resource. So please reach out to us. Let us know how we can help you. For me personally, I work with GME, so I do free CV reviews. That's pretty helpful for the most part. Get those back to you pretty quickly, but we kind of help you as far as taking some of the work out of finding a job. So we partner with a lot of healthcare facilities across the country, and we can kind of take your criteria and help you find that perfect first practice. So keep that in mind as you move along. Are you planning on taking some time off for yourself and your family after boards?
I haven't considered it that much yet. I know just from speaking to some people, like for instance, there are 2 girls that I'm working with right now who they were hired in February and they're still not credentialed yet. So they are working full time. And so I'm not really sure. I know my husband and I had spoken about possibly going on a trip to Hawaii. So we're kind of like hoping that stays in the plans. But I kind of always think that what should happen will happen. And if it means that I take off a couple months because of whatever, but for right now, I'm not really in the plans for that, but I'm not considering it either. It'll be what it is, I think, when I graduate. I think I would absolutely have said yes had you asked me at the end of clinical year.
Right.
But this feels,
Right.
It's not a break, but it's definitely feels less stressful.
Sure. It's just an exciting new adventure now. Do you have plans to move back to the Midwest, do you think? Or are you definitely a beach bum now?
Well, my family would love me to say yes. I'm not sure. Part of it, when we were coming to school here, everything lined up so perfectly. My landlord that I rented from for my business kind of came to me and was like, hey, so I rented your space out starting May 1st. And then my husband got a job and it started May 1st. Mm-hmm. And then something else happened that was May 1st. Oh, our house sold and the closing date was April 28th. And so to me, that was just like, okay, I'm definitely doing the right thing here. I think that will definitely apply to some jobs back in the Midwest. And if it's an amazing offer, I'm definitely not saying no, but my heart has fallen in love with Tampa. So I'm just not sure where I want to be exactly.
Gotcha. Well, St. Louis would be fortunate to have you.
Oh, thank you.
A lot of great places there in St. Louis, of course. So anything else you want to tell any listeners, anything you want to say? I will mention we will be doing the First Practice Funds again for the fall of 2025. So we want our listeners to be sure to check that out. That will be coming soon. Some announcements on when that will open and close, but a great way to get some good money. But anything else you want to say to our listeners before you go?
I just want to say that if you are on this journey of medicine, good luck and don't give up. And there are so many times in this journey, because now it's been since January of 2019 for me, so over 6 years, where it's been hard, and that's okay. And, I'm not saying that if it's not your path, don't do it. This is definitely a passion-driven field, but don't give up. Don't be so hard on yourself. You do deserve this, and you deserve to be here. And I think probably the best advice that I got from a friend a long, long time ago was, if you wouldn't say it to my face, don't you dare say it to yourself, because it's so true. We're so mean to ourselves. And I think since changing that mindset, I have completely changed how I treat myself and how I feel, and it's a lot better.
I think that's true. I always say that your biggest critic is yourself. And a lot of times your biggest enemy is also yourself. And it's hard to get past that. But I want to thank you on behalf of myself and PracticeLink. We thank Jill Wenger for being a guest on our podcast. For our listeners, please reach out with any questions or feedback about anything we covered today by emailing me. If you wish to receive more information about PracticeLink, please visit our website, www.practicelink.com. My name is Charley Lowry, and we thank you for listening to Surviving and Thriving in Residency.